They handed me the letter at 3:17 in the morning. I was finishing my rounds at the hospital when a nurse approached me with an envelope marked "Personal and Confidential." Inside was a handwritten note from a 73-year-old patient who had passed away the night before. His words still echo in my mind. "Doc, I wish someone had told me these things when I turned 60. Maybe my wife and I could have had 10 more good years instead of 10 years of silence." The very beliefs they held about aging and sexuality were slowly destroying their health, their relationships, and their sense of being alive. I'm Dr. Michael Harrison, and I've dedicated my career to helping men navigate the changes that come with aging, not just the medical ones, but the deeply personal ones that no one talks about. Before it was too late, these aren't just tips or suggestions. These are life-changing truths that can transform how you feel about your body, your relationships, and your future. But before we dive in, I need you to understand something crucial. Everything I'm about to tell you flies in the face of what society has taught you about aging. You've been told to slow down, to accept less, to quietly fade into the background. But the research, the clinical evidence, and the testimonies of my patients tell a completely different story. One where your 60s, 70s, and beyond can be some of the most fulfilling years of your intimate life. Your response helps me understand where you are in this journey, and trust me, wherever you are, there's hope. Old retired teacher who walked into my office with his shoulders slumped and his voice barely above a whisper. He told me he hadn't been intimate with his wife in over 2 years. Not because he didn't love her, not because she wasn't interested, but because he believed his time had passed. "Doc," he said, "I figured this part of life was over. I didn't want to embarrass myself or disappoint her. So common, and it's so wrong. The human body, even at 69, 79, or 89, is still designed for connection, for pleasure, for the physical expression of love. Your nervous system doesn't suddenly shut down. Your capacity for arousal doesn't disappear. Your need for touch and intimacy doesn't evaporate. What happens instead is that we accept a cultural lie that tells us to step aside and make room for younger people, for connection, for the deep satisfaction that comes from physical closeness, remains intact. I've seen 70-year-old men rediscover passion they thought was gone forever. I've watched couples married for 40 years experience a second honeymoon in their retirement, not because they found some miracle cure, but because they learned to honor their bodies as they are now, not mourn what they used to be. It's knowledge. It's understanding that your body is still capable of incredible things when you give it the attention and care it deserves. And speaking of attention and care, that brings us to our second secret, one that most men completely overlook. Secret number 2, the biggest threat to your intimate life isn't age, it's neglect. He'd been experiencing difficulties with erections, low energy, and a general sense that his body was failing him. But when I asked about his lifestyle, the picture became clear. He'd stopped exercising regularly. He ate whatever was convenient. He drank more than he used to. And most tellingly, he'd completely abandoned any form of self-care related to his sexual health. I figured it didn't matter anymore, he told me. Why maintain something I'm not using? Would you stop changing the oil just because you don't drive it as often? Would you let the battery die because you're not racing anymore? Of course not. You'd maintain it because you value it, because you know that with proper care, it could serve you for decades to come. Exercise, though those are crucial. It's about maintaining your connection to your own sexuality, your own capacity for pleasure, your own sense of yourself as a vital sexual being. I've seen men transform their entire experience of aging simply by refusing to neglect this part of themselves. They start paying attention to their bodies again. They begin to see themselves as worthy of pleasure, worthy of intimacy, worthy of the full human experience. And when they do that, everything changes. I treated a man named David who was 74 years old. He'd been struggling with erectile dysfunction for over a decade, and he'd tried everything: pills, injections, devices. Nothing worked consistently. He was ready to give up entirely. But during our conversation, something interesting emerged. David was a former engineer, a man who'd built his career on solving complex problems. And yet, when it came to his intimate life, he'd become passive, defeated, resigned, an anticipation that was sabotaging his performance. Every time he attempted intimacy, his mind would flood with worry about failure, about disappointing his partner, about confirming his worst fears about aging. But here's the secret that changed everything for David. Your mind, unlike your body, actually gets more powerful with age. You have decades of experience, wisdom, and emotional maturity that younger men lack. You understand patience, communication, and the deeper aspects of intimacy that go far beyond just physical performance. He had the patience to explore and experiment without the desperate urgency of youth. Within 6 months, David wasn't just functioning better. He was experiencing a level of intimacy and satisfaction that surpassed anything he'd known in his younger years. Not because his body had returned to its 30-year-old state, but because his mind had learned to work with his body instead of against it. The fourth secret builds on this perfectly because it's about something that society tells you to abandon, but that science shows becomes more important with age.